Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How's it going?
Good. This is a bit of a new beginning for us here, recording on a Sunday evening for a Monday morning release.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever released an episode on a Monday morning or recorded on a Sunday night. So definitely a different way to end off the weekend. But I'm excited. As we mentioned in our last episode, which was, of course, just a few days ago, we're going to start recording 2 episodes a week, one on Sunday night for a Monday morning release that's going to recap all the games and the action from the weekend. And then our usual time slot, Thursday evening recording, Friday morning release with some other stuff, as well as our feature interview for them.
We're going to talk about a whole bunch of games from this weekend. I guess the Wild match technically is from Thursday, but the Cavalry match on Friday, and then Friday evening there was, I believe, 4 League One Alberta games. So, I think we got a few things to talk about, and let's get it started, I guess.
This is Keelan Stewart. You are listening to YYC Soccer Podcast.
Let's start with the Calgary Wild. They played on Thursday evening, and they were in Toronto playing AFC Toronto. Had a bit of a road trip. I believe they were in Halifax, and I think they just went directly to Toronto afterwards. So a bit of disappointment in this one.
Yeah, this was a 2-1 loss, dropping Calgary's record down to 1 win and 2 losses after their first 3 games. So I watched this one, most of it. It seemed like Toronto was the team more on the front foot. However, Calgary did have a few decent chances, but they really struggled to contend defensively with Toronto's main striker, Esther Okoronkwo, who scored both of their goals, both of which were really nice, Jason, especially that second one, which was a curler into the puck.
Yeah, she's unquestionably a talent. Both goals were pretty good, and I think in a general sense, she wreaked a lot of havoc in the parts of the match I watched. She was out there causing the Wild defenders some fits.
Yeah, I think it was Mika Rolfsson who was her main defender, and I think Okoronkwo's speed just got the better of Rolfsson a couple of times. But the Wild did pull one back late, second goal of the season from defender Michaela Moore. Very similar to her first goal, actually, where a free kick from the right, in swinging cross, and she gets her head on it at the back post. But it was a little bit too little, too late, and unfortunately the Wild weren't able to pick up a point, even though they did push for an equalizer late.
We talked very briefly before we started recording, but I thought it would be a good topic to get into in the episode. But you commented, Scott, that this looks like a team that needs a home match.
Calgary, yeah, this is their third away game in a row, and I don't know if it's because, like you mentioned, it was a road trip and they stayed out east this entire, how long has it been? More than a week since their game against Halifax.
Their Halifax game was on a Saturday, and this was on a Thursday.
That's 4 or 5 days of sleeping in a hotel, and I don't know. I just got the feeling watching this game that they maybe looked a bit tired or just a bit not jet lagged, but just Toronto seemed to have a little more pep in their step than the Wild did. And of course, after 3 games, the Wild haven't played at home yet, and that's coming up next weekend. And I think it'll be a real boost because obviously they've been playing in front of away fans. They haven't had that backing of a home crowd yet, and I think they could really benefit from that next weekend.
Scott, anybody really jumping out at you after these first few matches? Someone you're particularly impressed with, someone you're surprised with, someone you're disappointed with, and any or all of those?
A player that has stood out is Maggie Doherty-Howard. I think she's been solid in each game. Maybe not as much in this third game as in the first 2. But and then pointing out that Michaela Moore has gotten 2 goals as a center back. I think she's shown that she can be an attacking threat in addition to being solid at the back. I think our goalkeeping has been pretty good so far. Obviously, we haven't had a clean sheet yet, but Stephanie Bukovic has really done well and made some big saves. And then Jackie Savitsky in midfield, I think she is probably the Wild's best passer from what I've seen. Yeah, she has really good passing range and seems to have a good eye for a through ball. But And then I guess I would also point out Callie Johnson. I'm predicting she's going to be the Wild's top scorer. She has had a couple of really good games and obviously has 2 goals to speak for it. And yeah, she was midway through the A-League when she left, and she was the top scorer when she came over. So no, I fully expect that she'll bag a few more goals for the Wild and maybe become a fan favorite as a result of that. But those were the names I said. Those were the ones who have stood out for the right reasons. But there's probably more that I could talk about. But yeah, I don't want to say any names as like people who haven't impressed yet. I think it's still a bit too early to be throwing anyone under the bus. But
Yeah.
obviously, Calgary's lost 2 of their 3 games. So it hasn't been the best of starts. And like I mentioned, yeah, they could really use a home game right now. All right. Before we move on to the next segment and talk about Cavalry, let's just talk briefly about the NSL standings. A little bit weird right now because some teams have played 3 games, some have played 2, and Halifax has still only played that 4-1 loss to the Wild. It is interesting to see that 4 teams are on 3 points at the moment.
Yeah, Montreal is way ahead. They're the class of the league in first place. But then Calgary, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver all have 3 points. And Vancouver and Ottawa have only played 2 matches, while Toronto and Calgary have played 3. So pretty even there overall. And then, yeah, even Halifax has no points, but they've only played 1 game, so they could easily be at that 3-point mark soon enough. So with the exception of Montreal being kind of dominant at this point, everybody else is kind of, at least from the perspective of the table, pretty much at the same level.
Yeah, and they'll be wanting to catch up to Montreal, and maybe next week's game between Calgary and Ottawa is a really intriguing one because the winner of that game could be challenging for second in these early weeks. I think obviously Toronto and Vancouver will have something to say about that, but I am really curious to see how Calgary does against Ottawa.
Hello, Fraser Aird here, guys, and you are listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Jason, less than 24 hours after the Calgary Wild players left the York Lions Stadium pitch, Cavalry's players took to that particular field. Very interesting coincidence that 2 nights in a row, 2 Calgary teams were playing at York University. Friday night, Cavalry got their first win of the 2025 CPL season, beating York United 2-1. I didn't find this game to be that memorable, other than the fact that Sergio Camargo probably got himself a slap on the wrist afterward for his post-game comments.
So the final score was 2-1, and the match started off with a Tobias Warshevsky goal in the 42nd minute. And then right before halftime whistle was blown, in injury time, Julian Altobelli scored, I think, his 5th goal of the season. And then the winning goal was in the 69th minute. Fraser Aird got one. So thoughts about those goals, Scott? Classic Warshevsky, I thought.
Yeah, he was just right place, right time. It was a decent cross in from Nicholas Veiling, but a York defender got his toe to it. Wasn't able to properly clear it, and it fell right to Warshevsky, but he did well to react with very little time and managed to take a touch to set himself up and then just slam it home from short range. Classic striker's goal, very typical of Warshevsky. And then, 1-1 after the half, Fraser Aird got in on the scoring, I think shortly after the hour. Really nice driven shot into the bottom left corner after some nice work down the wing from Sergio Camargo, who laid it off. But I thought the goalkeeper, York's goalkeeper, I can't remember his name right now. He's a new guy. But I didn't really think he did well on that Fraser Aird shot. I thought he could have definitely got a palm to it. Wasn't that far away from him.
Yeah, there just seemed to be a little bit of confusion and chaos on that play. And I would agree. I thought it was a play where the keeper probably had a chance. Aird driving shot, on target, and that was the difference, right? So there we go. But yeah, let's go back and talk about Camargo and about some of the other stuff going on. Like, I don't know what you thought of this game, Scott, but I am not a person that likes complaining about refereeing and officiating calls. I usually think even if they're kind of sort of warranted, you might say there's a play that, wasn't called, right? I usually think when the officiating is not great, it usually is not great for both sides. But I did kind of find in this game, it was, I was starting to get really irritated by all of the balls on the close touchline. It seemed to me there were many, many times where York got possession, and I didn't think they should.
Yeah, so I guess let's just kind of tell it if you haven't heard or you're not sure what exactly we're referring to. After the game, Camargo was interviewed and asked what Cavalry did to pull out the win. He said something along the lines of, "We didn't cry every time the ref made a call the other way," and then he said the ref was a clown, and that the reffing has been bad against York all season. The refs have been falling for their behavior, is basically what he said. So pretty shocking comments, to be honest. But you could tell during the game that Camargo was really frustrated by the reffing. I know he mouthed off a little bit during the match. I mean, yeah, like York they weren't time wasting because they were down, but they were, there was a lot of stoppages. It felt like the game didn't have that much of a flow because there was always a free kick and then some complaining, and then free kick gets taken, another foul happens, it happens again. So it just wasn't the most enjoyable match to watch and that was part of the reason. Well, this game, if we run through the stats, there were 28 fouls overall, which isn't too much. That was 16 from York and 12 from Cavalry, but it just felt like a lot of the fouls resulted in a long stoppage of play because there was a little bit of ref crowding and complaining going on. In terms of yellow cards, there were 4 for York and 2 for Cavalry, and then no one got sent off. But yeah, it's just this felt like a bit of a chore to watch, if I'm being honest. This wasn't a game that I'm gonna be reminiscing about for very long.
Yeah, I think maybe the only reason we could potentially end up talking about it is if Michael Baldissimo, if that injury is significant, that could be this game may come up again for that reason.
Yeah, this was a real eyebrow raiser because all he did was pass the ball, and then his it wasn't even like his standing leg buckled. It was the leg that his right foot, right, the one that he passed with. He kicked the ball and then immediately grabbed his knee and then went down. And yeah, that was early into the match. So really disappointing because I was really excited to watch him play a bit more, and I'm imagining that he's going to be out for a little while at least with injury. But a completely innocuous play where he just passed the ball and then felt something go wrong.
I rewound it a couple times to watch it, and there was not anyone like even remotely near him. It's not even like he was being pressured and had to move funny. It was like, anyway, I will say though that I thought Max Pipegrass actually played pretty decently in his in replacement. I get maybe a little bit of confidence from that great goal he scored a few nights earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he came in. He definitely I bet he didn't even expect to play, and then 15 minutes in, he's warming up to go in to replace an injured player. But yeah, you're right. He had a important job, and he seemed to be, defensive midfield, and he didn't let the occasion phase him. He was confident on the ball. He was smart in possession, and that's what you want from that position. So excellent work from Max Pipegrass to come in very short notice and fill in a very important role.
All right. Anything else about Cavalry before we move on here?
It's notable that, 4 games into the season now? If you don't count the cup game, Cavalry still hasn't gotten a clean sheet. They haven't, done poorly defensively. They've only allowed in 6 goals, but they've only scored 4 after 4 games. So a little bit off compared to last year even when they weren't winning, they were often drawing 0-0 or they weren't allowing very many goals. And that hasn't been the case yet this season.
Ali Musi hasn't scored yet, or he hasn't got an assist yet, I don't think either.
I don't think so. I may be off on that, but I don't recall him being directly involved in a goal. And I know he's been subbed off a couple of times, I want to say. So it's been a frustrating start to the season for one of Cavalry's best players, for sure.
When you look at the table, Cavalry is in fifth place. They're tied with York and Pacific in fifth, but they do have one game in hand on both of those teams. So anyway, it's early days, but their next match will be on Saturday in Halifax. And they kind of have the reverse thing going on that the Wild had. Wild started in Halifax and went to Toronto, and Cavalry started in Toronto, and then they're going to Halifax.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it'll be an easy game. Halifax is doing quite well right now. They're second place, and they'll be at home. Tough place to go. So curious to see how Cavalry does in that.
I'm Caden Rogozinski, and this is YYC Soccer Podcast.
This past Friday was the first real full weekend of League One Alberta action. There was a match a couple weeks earlier where Rangers went up to Edmonton, but this was the first match night where 8 of the 9 teams were involved, and 2 of those matches were in Calgary. And we'll break down each one a little bit, at least talk about scores. I think we'll talk about the one I was at first. I had a chance to go over to the soccer center, the West Soccer Center on Friday evening, and I saw some of the Callies Foothills match.
Yeah, and how'd that go? You saw some of the men's match, I understand, right?
Yeah, Foothills won 4-1, and it was pretty interesting to watch. I saw a couple things in that match that were, caught my attention. One thing is that score, I would say, makes it sound like it wasn't as interesting a game as it was, because it was tied up for quite a while, and then Foothills was ahead 2-1. Those last 2 goals that Foothills got were right at the end, so obviously that salted it away for them. But I'd say that scoreline makes it sound a lot more lopsided than I think the play in the game was. A couple things I thought I would mention. Callies' only goal was scored by Anson Minty, and he played for Cavalry U21 team last year. Kudos to him. He had a great individual effort on that goal, and he actually beat out Caden Rogozinski really on a one-on-one situation and scored. It was quite an impressive individual feat, I thought. And one of the other goals for Foothills was by Teslich David, and Teslich David is player for SAIT, and he won the ACAC Men's Player of the Year last year. Can't remember if that's for the whole conference or that's just the south part of the conference, but anyway, he definitely's got some skill, and he was out there. I noticed him. So those are a couple of people that I would say grabbed my attention, but there's no shortage of players, recognizable names throughout those rosters. And another thing is that these rosters are not really fully complete yet. Like, some of these players have been announced, but they weren't playing because they're still in school or whatever. So I know I did speak with one official from a team, and they said like they're going to have a completely different team in a couple of weeks once everybody comes back from university. So it obviously a good first taste of things, but yeah, there's going to be a lot more players added in the next week or two.
Yeah, I was noticing that because I was going through the scores for all the games on Friday night. And I was a little bit like, oh, who is that? And then that just kept happening. So I think there's a lot of new faces or players who may not be featuring as much once some of the US-based players are back. But yeah, and that was the men's game, Foothills versus Callies. So every League One fixture is a doubleheader. So there would have been the women's Foothills taking on the women's Callies United as well. As we talked about in our last episode, Foothills, because they're not fielding a UWS team this year, their League One team is probably going to be quite strengthened compared to the previous 2 years. And I think we saw a little bit of that potentially with Foothills beating Callies 3-0 on Friday.
Yeah, I think it was a somewhat dominant performance, but a lot of the players that we've talked about that are going to be joining that team, Izzy Monk, Rachel Barlow, the Schneider sisters, none of them were present for this match. So Avril Jameson scored 2 of the goals, and Ashlyn Walia, who I believe played for the high performance team last year, they scored the goals for Foothills.
So let's rattle off some of the other games that happened Friday evening. So at West Island College in Calgary, BTB men from Edmonton played Calgary Villains, and this looked like, from a neutral's perspective, it would have been quite entertaining. 8 goals in a 5-3 win for BTB.
And then you look at the women's matchup, and it was Villains 4, BTB 3. So in the course of those 2 games, there were a lot of goals scored.
Yep, 15 goals. If you watched both of those, it would have been pretty hard to keep up with. I noticed that Cavalry U21 had a pretty strong outing versus St. Albert Impact, getting a 2-0 win. And that was not in Calgary, that was out in Edmonton, or probably St. Albert. But 2 familiar faces getting in on the goals for Cavalry, James McGlinchey and Owen Antonia, right after their pro games on Tuesday night.
If you're familiar with sort of some of the younger players on Cavalry, some of the players who didn't travel to Toronto, like Michael Harms, for example, he was in this match. Chandan Chanda was in this match, and Nevin Fuster, who's the number 3 goalie, I guess if you look at the depth chart for the Cavs, he was started this one. So yeah, a bunch of familiar names, and they obviously got off to a good start. But in the other half of that doubleheader, the Calgary Wild U21 team did not have a good start.
No, not at all. This was dominance. St. Albert beat Calgary Wild U21 10-0, and I don't know if I've seen a League One Alberta score so lopsided before.
Yeah, I don't have really any idea about what happened in this match. I took a quick look at some of the players that are playing for this the Wild U21 team, and I recognize a few of the names, but I think it's a very young team. But yeah, that's still a pretty shocking score, because when you think even last year that Alberta High Performance team, they were also a very young team, and I don't think they lost 10-0. So probably a learning experience for those players, I'm sure.
All right, so just to wrap up some of the other League One action from Friday night, game in Edmonton between Blizzard and Scottish finished goalless. And then in the other half of that doubleheader on the men's side, a very similar neck-and-neck score between Blizzard and Scottish, finishing 1-1.
And there will be another League One doubleheader on Monday evening at the West Soccer Bubble here in Calgary. Blizzard will play Villains, and that will be the women's match will be at 5:30, and the men's match will be at 8. So usually League One hasn't been doing Monday games; they've been usually doing Tuesday games. So yeah, we're gonna see this one on Monday, and then we can potentially talk about that on our next episode. So I think that's going to cover it for this early week episode. We'll be back on Friday with another episode. So thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there so you can buy Scott's book about Calgary soccer history. You can leave us a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.